The Strange Disappearance of Eric Sears. On July 14, 2004, friends and recent graduates of Carlsbad High School in California, 17-year-olds Eric Sears and Ben Fogelstrom, decided to go on a camping trip together in Joshua Tree National Park. The two of them showed up to their campsite in Jumbo Rocks and were just having a good time. They were turned away from the San Jacinto due to wildfires. Around noon is when investigators believe the two boys became separated. Teams of searchers were told that Eric became dehydrated and Ben went to go and find some water. Eric stayed behind and curled up underneath a picnic bench to try and rest in the shade until Ben returned. When Ben came back, he couldn't find Eric anywhere and became panicked. Some other campers came across him, how is still unclear, and brought him into the park office to report the disappearance of Eric at around 4:40 the next afternoon. The search of a 20-square-mile area of the park began at 6 p.m. that evening. There was an intensive search and rescue operation. The park's SAR team scoured the area with help from various law enforcement teams, and as of Sunday, there were 170 searchers in total. But by Monday, the number of searchers had dropped to 40 because the volunteers had to return to work. The search included tracking dogs, horses, a helicopter, fixed-wing planes, and climbers who looked in rock crevices where he could have fallen. Robert Fonda, one of the park's lead trackers, said the search was difficult because it had taken place in 100-plus degree heat every day and because the terrain varied from really flat to boulder outcroppings where the footing is perilous. He stated, "We've been working a lot in the back areas and making sure that some teams didn't miss anything. You can't speculate about what may have happened. You just have to search." Searchers did find some of Eric's shoe prints, and the dogs were able to pick up his scent, but none of it enabled them to determine where he was going. Eric was described as in top physical condition. He ran cross-country for 4 years in high school and even traveled to Australia 2 years earlier with other state runners. As an adult, he also participated in a 24-hour relay race between Carlsbad and El Camino high schools at Carlsbad, July 10th and 11th, to promote the sport and help raise money. Unfortunately, all would not end well. Eric's body was found on July 23rd. The cause of death couldn't be determined by autopsy because that time it was too badly decomposed. There was no obvious trauma found anywhere on the body. This is when the investigators turned to the only person who was with him that night for answers. The rest of the story, as told by Ben to the authorities, is strange to say the least. Here's what Ben said had happened leading up to the disappearance, though he admitted to authorities during this statement that he was having trouble distinguishing what actually happened from hallucinations he was certain he was having due to his and Eric's partaking in a wildly grown illicit but not illegal in the state of California substance the night before. His report was oftentimes conflicting and all over the place. He told authorities both he and Eric had drank a tea made from a certain weed. He claimed he remembered speaking to a bush, an Indian, and possibly to Eric. He said he was pretty sure his friend was deceased because he thought he remembered disposing of his body. He also couldn't tell authorities exactly how Eric had gone missing or ended up deceased, depending on which story Ben was recounting at the time. However, two chemicals, toxins, found in this plant were found in Eric's brain tissue. One way or another, the use of this plant by Ben and Eric was a major contributing factor in Eric's death. The plant, known as Jimson weed, loco weed, stinkweed, madapple, thornapple, are among the street names for the foul-smelling Datura stramonium plant. It is one of a group of plants known as belladonnas. Datura stramonium is a common weed found along roadsides, in cornfields, pastures, and waste areas. It's been reported to grow widely in all but 2 states, Wyoming and Alaska. Although it's not popular on the street, it is usually used by teenagers curious about the plant's hallucinogenic and euphoric effects. Although it's something adolescents might use with their peers, all parts of the plant are toxic, and usage can result in serious illness or death. It can take up to hours for someone to feel the plant's effects, so people often consume excessive amounts believing it's not working. Since it's growing wild, the potency is impossible to predict. The toxicity even varies by year, between plants, parts of the plant, and even among different leaves on the same plant. Even just a small amount of it ingested can cause nausea, headache, severe agitation, hallucinations, behavioral changes, and/or delirium. Annually, poison control centers deal with approximately 1,000 cases of poisoning by these plants. Usage increases between May and September when the plants are mature and plentiful. The overwhelming majority of users report that their experience was very unpleasant, physically dangerous, and sometimes terrifying. Few people ever use it twice. Even a one-time usage can have tragic effects, such as in this case. With all that being said, one may ask, what is the lure to experiment with a plant which seems to have no pleasant effects whatsoever? The effects have been described as being in a living dream and can last for days. It has extremely powerful psychoactive effects, including hallucinations, delusions, disorientation, confusion, and panic. Doesn't sound like my idea of fun. Users have no concept that anything they are talking to, seeing, or running from isn't actually there. That's how intense these hallucinations can be, where it's impossible to distinguish them from reality. Oddly enough, some of the hallucinations are reported to have recurrent themes, such as insects, cigarettes, people, or objects appearing and disappearing, including demons and monsters. Smoking a phantom cigarette is one of the most common hallucinations, even if the individual has never smoked before. Talking to inanimate objects, plants, and friends who are not present is also frequently reported. Individuals lose their ability to identify their friends and may not even recognize their own reflection in a mirror. The individual may also try to interact with these hallucinations. Most users don't even realize that they're hallucinating until its effects wear off. Amnesia is also frequently reported, with users having no memory of what they were doing for several hours, or they may unconsciously replace fact with fantasy. They can fall in and out of conscious, slip into delirium. It's believed that this is what happened with Eric and Ben while they were out being typical teenagers that night in Joshua Tree. Did they get in over their heads and one thing lead to another? Did Eric die of an overdose from taking too much, thinking the initial doses weren't effective or not working for him? Or was it something else altogether? Unfortunately, Jimson Weeds-related deaths are often a result of impaired judgment that leads to risk-taking activities, such as believing you can fly and jumping off a cliff or chasing a mermaid in a lake, even though you can't swim. The above listed are nowhere near all the dangerous effects this particular belladonna could have on the human brain and psyche. So, what happened to Eric Sears that fateful night in 2004, when he had his whole life ahead of him and was just looking to have some fun with his friend in a beautiful place, in celebration of the huge life milestone of graduating high school? Eric was described by his peers as popular and friendly, and as mentioned before, was a member of the cross-country team. He had been accepted into the engineering program at San Diego State University and was to begin classes that fall. His death affected the whole community. According to an affidavit filed at Superior Court in Indio, he provided several stories of hallucinating during the night, with he being Ben Fogelstrom. The community was heartbroken with the discovery of Eric's body and with the seeming senselessness of it on top of it all. On the porch of the Sears home, signs with messages of hope, flowers, and red and white and blue candles formed what was to be a welcome for the family when they returned. Parents Tom and Wendy Sears have remained at the desert campground since shortly after their son was reported missing. Officials said the Sears family was in seclusion Friday night in nearby 29 Palms, and that their daughter, Stephanie, age 19, was en route to join them. Many were expected to return later in the evening to share prayers and light candles against the darkness at the Sears home, something they have done night after night this week. Neighbors and friends said the mutual support provided by the small, close community has at times been the only thing that carried them through more than a week of waiting. Groups of neighbors have traveled daily to Joshua Tree to help support the family. There was a search warrant issued for Ben's home in hopes of uncovering more information. According to this affidavit, investigators did give him a lie detector test, but we know that these are faulty and not admissible in most courts. This was while searchers were still looking for Eric in the Joshua Tree Park. According to the affidavit, Ben tearfully admitted during an interview with detectives that he found Eric dead inside his tent. He said that happened the day he reported his friend as missing. This is also where he admitted to disposing of Eric's body by putting it inside an outhouse toilet at their campsite. But, according to the affidavit, that's when he wanted to stop talking to investigators and then changed the story altogether. Investigators say he later denied dumping Eric's body in an outhouse and said That's not where I put him. Investigators did indeed check several park toilets, but searchers eventually found Eric's body lying in the middle of the desert, about 3 miles from the Jumbo Rocks campground. Sheriff's investigators tried hard to corroborate what Ben told them about what happened while they were at the campsite, before, during, and after they had consumed the plant. Whatever information was given to us in the affidavit, investigators are looking into it and looking at every scenario in the affidavit, they said. But despite statements Ben apparently made in this affidavit, the Sheriff's Department said he was not a suspect in the death. They did say that he is still a focus of their investigation as they try to figure out exactly how the 17-year-old ended up dead in the desert at Joshua Tree. No one was ever charged with anything in relation to the death of Eric Sears, and so much of what happened remains a mystery. To make matters worse and even more sad, 2 San Bernardino County Sheriff's Search and Rescue volunteers on their way to help search for Eric, a 35-year-old man named Joseph Tidwell from Wonder Valley, who was allegedly under the influence of several narcotic substances, lost consciousness due to his intoxication, causing his truck to drift across the roadway directly into the path of the sheriff's van. Scott Johnson, 30, of Redlands, died at the scene. Philip Calvert, 58, of Mentone, was transported to Desert Regional Medical Center with major injuries and sadly died early the next morning. Although this harmful plant isn't scheduled under the Controlled Substances Act, 3 states, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Tennessee, at this time, have passed legislation to control it. In addition, the FDA has asserted that the belladonna alkaloids in this plant are neither safe nor effective in over-the-counter or other cough and cold inhalants. So be careful what you put into your body. Well, friends, there you have it. A sad, strange tale indeed. Our condolences to the family and friends of Eric Sears. I look forward to your comments, but please keep it friendly and respectful. Till we meet again, be safe out there. Don't take chances. As for me, I'll see you a little farther on down the trail. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time.